Welcome to OTR Debate, podcast where three lawyers debate everything while managing to find out how it all comes back to the law. My name's Lando. I'm going to be the judge tonight, and we've got Mucci. And typically we're going to have we here, but this is not we. This is Andy, and he is not a lawyer, but he did pass the bar.
Yes, I definitely did.
The board game. And so what we're going to do for this episode is we're going to introduce a sort of mini game that we'll have later on in some of our episodes where it's going to be titled Pro Se Litigants. Basically, if you think that Mucci fucked up and he's wrong about one of his previous episodes, Capcom, some kind of video games, some kind of anime, call him out. You could be a pro se litigant and, debate Mucci. But tonight we're going to have Andy do it, and we're going to be just discussing... what are we going to be discussing, Mucci?
Resident Evil for me and Silent Hill.
For me.
Silent Hill versus Resident Evil. Mm-hmm. Franchises in video game world, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't played any of them, so...
Very spooky.
It is spooky season, so we're going to be, trying our best to get through this without getting too scared.
Yeah.
As always, the format, even with this episode, is opening statements, a couple of questions by your judge, and then closing arguments, and I'll make a decision. All right? You guys ready?
I'm ready.
I'm ready to shit my pants. Let's go.
Okay, Mucci, since Andy's going pro se, I think you should go first for the openings.
All right. I'll go right ahead. So, Resident Evil introduced the world to survival horror games in 1996 and still continues to innovate to this day, whether it's through new titles or their inspired remakes of their classic games. The focus of the story is generally on this evil pharmaceutical company known as the Umbrella Corporation and their development.
Not to be confused with the Umbrella Academy.
Correct, yeah.
Very
Which
title.
I actually thought when that show came out that it was somehow tied to Resident Evil because it is so iconic in a lot of ways. I mean, I think if there's something that you do know about the series, it usually is that. Maybe from the first movies or whatever.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no. But it's about that corporation, and they're developing like bioweapons. They're working on viruses, and of course, there's always some kind of outbreak that causes zombies to appear, and people turn into zombies, and also cause animals or plants to have this life or whatever too. So the heroes of the games are usually dealing with these outbreaks, whether it's at a mansion or throughout all of Raccoon City. In the second game, I think Raccoon City, or the third game, Raccoon City needs to be destroyed.
So Raccoon City?
Yeah, that's where it takes place. Fictional Midwest city, in fact.
Okay.
I love raccoons.
Yeah. I don't know if it's near Chicago canonically or what, or if it maybe is Chicago,
Something like Rats and
Gotham
would be
City
close to
sort of thing.
Chicago.
Something like that.
So it's kind of about usually it involves fighting zombies. That's kind of the premise of the game. Whether you have in the early games you have 5 ammo for 50 zombies, and as the games go on, as they get more action oriented, usually you have a lot more ammo and a lot of different weaponry. But that's kind of how the series developed a little bit differently. But overall, the vibe of the games I think is really it's scary at times, but really hits at that level of the kind of cozy Halloween-y kind of movie that you would watch. It's a lot more fun and comforting than it is actively scaring you. You might put on the movie Halloween and just have something fun to watch on Halloween, or you might put on Terrifier and have maybe a little bit worse of a time.
Yeah. Or Cannibal Holocaust.
Right.
Yeah.
Or Martyrs or something.
Yeah.
So I think Resident Evil
Haven't seen
provides
it, but it
that.
sounds spooky.
Yeah.
Martyrs is really
Definitely.
more than spooky. It's just kind of gross and messed up.
Super gross.
Anyway, Resident Evil is not like that. It is more of the kind of sometimes cheesy, kind of fun horror vibe, which I really enjoy.
Okay. Andy, what can you tell us about Silent Hill?
Well, what can I say? In my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill. The town that acts as a malevolent entity, shrouded in fog, dilapidated buildings, abandoned cars. It sounds like a really awesome nightclub, but it's not. What's really, really interesting about the game itself is how much of the town itself is a physical character. what it does is it's kind of like a lotus flytrap where essentially it lures its protagonists into the town, calling to them to deal with their traumas, their guilt for their past sins, or things that they might have regretted. And then
Can't get Mucci around that town.
oh no, he's seen too
So
much,
many regrets.
so much sin.
Well, famously, no regrets though.
No ragrats. No, but
Just came back from Amsterdam.
that's true. What I think is really interesting about the story itself in the series is the focus on the fact that the characters are everyman kind of characters. They're not, this elite task force of people that are like coming in to like investigate a giant haunted mansion. These are just people that have like done really bad things in their own life or have suffered really horrible like traumas to defend themselves from bad things. And what the town does is the deeper the protagonists and the characters go into the town, it turns into a labyrinth, and it becomes a second part called the Other World, and it turns all of the fears, traumas of all the characters against them and makes it into this giant labyrinth. So that's one of the things that I really love about the Silent Hill series.
Okay, so I am somewhat familiar with the Resident Evil games because I've played them, and I actually knew about Raccoon City. Not so much Silent Hill, but I guess my first question is going to be, give me some interesting storylines, some kind of, there's a couple games in each series, so give me some kind of storyline elements that you find interesting in both of your franchises. Andy, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that I really love about the series is, again, the focus on the detail to characters and how fully developed they are. A lot of video games at the time were very focused on, the simple basic idea of like a hero is a hero. There shouldn't be any character flaws behind that. Whereas the characters in these games are definitely flawed. It's kind of like you think about,
Like
a show.
Joel
Joel, or if you think about a television show, like for example, in the golden age of television, The Sopranos, right? You have a mafia guy who's like seeing a therapist. That's unheard of at the time. Same concept here with some of the protagonists. One that I will highlight is Silent Hill 2. The protagonist in Silent Hill 2, his name is James Sunderland.
Are they, because I know with Resident Evil,
Yes.
there's like, they're different, right?
Yeah.
But they're not always different.
Well, Resident Evil, but I think maybe Andy will shine a light on Silent Hill, but Resident Evil does follow like the same universe, same plot line. It's not like in Final Fantasy where everything's different.
Okay, I wasn't sure if with Silent Hill, do you have different protagonists throughout the series?
Yes, so that's the other thing that's interesting. Silent Hill 1 and 3 have very much the same like protagonists, like it's very tied together, whereas Silent Hill 2 and 4 aren't.
Okay.
And I know that there's other iterations of the games, but specifically I want to focus more on the first 4 because those were the ones that were developed by the Team Silent in Japan.
Damn, first 4.
Yeah,
How many games are there?
So there were 4 games, Silent Hill 1.
It's like 16 Resident Evil, right?
Oh, yeah, no, there's not as much Silent Hill as Resident Evils, but the first 4, it's Silent Hill 1, 2, 3, and then 4 is called The Room. Not to be confused with Tommy Wiseau's The Room.
Or the
That game
Captain
tears
Marvel.
me apart.
Captain Marvel, yeah. I mean, the game does tear you apart. But then further out,
He did not hit her.
no, he didn't. Although I don't know with
James
these
Sunderland did,
characters,
maybe.
maybe. What's really cool is
Did not.
at the time, Konami like focused primarily on the 4 to be developed by Team Silent, which was their own like little like umbrella under their development team, and then afterwards, Team Silent
Corporation.
Yes.
Umbrella.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Tying it together.
So Team Silent eventually disbanded, and Konami was looking to outsource the series. So they gave the license to the series to create games like to Western companies. So I believe there was 4 more games. There was Silent Hill Origins, there was Silent Hill Shattered Memories, Silent Hill Homecoming, and Silent Hill Downpour. So those were primarily the ones that were Western games. And then further out, you had a surprise, like kind of almost bringing it back to home, a game that was developed by Hideo Kojima called...
I've heard that name.
Yeah, Silent Hill, or Silent Hills PT, and that was supposed to be developed with...
Physical therapy?
Yeah, no, it was
Playable teasers.
It's playable teaser, but essentially Kojima
Scary as hell.
was... Yeah, Kojima had worked previously with the original members of the Silent Hill team in some sort of way. One of the founding members had worked specifically on Snatcher, which was essentially an adaptation of Blade Runner by Hideo Kojima. But in this game, playable teaser, Hideo Kojima had set out to make one of the scariest games that he hoped like would make players like shit their pants. And so it was released for free like back in 2014. Yeah, and I will say I did shit my pants. It was one of the scariest games that have ever been made.
You've heard it here first, folks.
I did. I'm not
shit his
ashamed.
pants.
I'm not ashamed to admit it.
I think I only watched
You should be.
No, nothing is deplorable or degrading to me.
I think I only watched it playthrough on like YouTube, and it was pretty scary.
You also
it looks
shit
pretty
your
real.
pants?
Yeah, I also did.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
But kind of to go back to the game, we'll talk a little bit about Konami and a little bit of their frustrating history. So anyway, Silent Hill 2. I like Silent Hill 2. I think it's one of the stronger games in the series, and it has a lot more of an opportunity to focus on like the psychological trauma of its characters.
Okay.
It follows the main protagonist. His name is James Sunderland, and he's represented, as an everyday man. He wears like this military jacket. It's got like blonde hair, got like charm face. So he receives a mysterious letter from his wife saying, "Hey, I'm in Silent Hill. Come meet me at our special place." But the problem is his wife died 3 years ago. And at the beginning of the game, you don't know how. So
That is a problem.
very spooky, like right off to begin with. So where you start is at this like park view. And then there's this like service tunnel that goes straight into the town. But the town like service tunnel is blocked off. So James has to get out of his car and all of a sudden like try to find a way to get into the town. So when he gets to the town, it's all just creepy, like run down, like quiet ghost buildings, dilapidated, like everything. And
We know which town you're comparing it to.
yeah, exactly. Cleveland. No. So anyway,
No, this one's Detroit.
no, this one's Detroit. So he goes and wanders around, and he finally reaches this. He's led to this like apartment complex where he meets this like little girl, and this little girl's just like kind of like fucking with him in a way. He's like,
So glad you edited yourself in the middle of her.
yeah, sorry. It's kind of messing with him. So what ends up happening is like as he goes further and further into the town, like he starts seeing all these other characters, and one of the characters' name is Maria, and Maria is just like this like exact like has the exact resemblance as his dead wife Mary. And the only thing that is different is like Mary is kind of portrayed in the game to be sort of like this like very like proper kind of like, lady who's like self-reserved, whereas like Mary is just like, yeah, baby, like everything that kind of like would represent sort of like the male gaze. So Maria is like kind of like this like figure that's kind of trying to guide James away from Mary in a way. And there's several scenes where like, she's just kind of like there, like being like, hey, James, like, let's have some fun. Let's tango. And James is just like, no, I need to find my wife. Like, get away from me, weirdo. But then as it goes further and further, he starts to discover that there's this being, this creature called Pyramid Head. And it's literally like just like this.
Scary as hell.
Yeah, it's this.
Scarier than Chainsaw
It's
Man.
this guy that has like, he's like half naked at the top, wears like a toga, has like a
I assumed
spear,
as much.
and then he has like a sharp like pyramid head that looks like a sharp metal like cone. So it's just kind of like an entity that keeps following throughout the series. But then you get to the ending of the game and you find out that like James had supposedly murdered his wife out of like, it's up to interpretation, but mercy, because she had been dying of this like disease that had been killing her. And so as a way to kind of put her out of her misery, he just kind of did that. And so when he comes to terms with it, he starts to realize that the town was like messing with his like mind and kind of dealing with his guilt, that he eventually confronts two pyramid heads, not one, two, and says, hey, I know what this is and I'll fucking face you on. I know what I've done. I'm ready. Let's do this. Let's dance. And there's several different endings of the game, but the one that is supposedly considered canon is that by the end of the game, he meets Maria, but it's a fucked up version of Maria, dressed up as like Mary and saying, hey, like I am Mary. Everything's fine. But then Maria's like trying to get James to come back.
That's why I actually moved
Yeah.
the original, at least.
Yeah. Mary's trying to get James to like come back. Maria's trying to like get James, and she's like, I can be Mary, I can be whoever. And James just like, no, I want my wife. Like, stop. And then
I killed my wife.
Yeah.
I don't want my wife.
No, he killed his wife, but he does want his wife back. So he's just like,
He needs to make up his mind.
yeah. Well, that's the other thing too. He's very indecisive in this game. So anyway, he turns down Maria. Maria turns into this like fucking crazy creature, and then just starts chasing him. He kills Maria, and then by the end of the game, he starts back in his car and he's like, I can't do this anymore. He succumbs to his guilt and he drives off into the lake and drowns. And that's the end of the game. One of the endings.
Sounds like Johnny in the room.
Yeah.
Gotta say.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple other endings. Two of them are really funny.
Forgot about that.
Two of them are really funny. One of them is a reoccurring ending that always happens in all of the games, and it's always where the main protagonist just gets abducted by UFOs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, that's something I can get
There you
behind.
go. See?
More points.
And
We might
two,
have to cut it here.
this is like, if you do certain actions with James, you find out that the whole thing was masterminded by this like dog who is a Shiba Inu with like controls and just saying, yeah, I orchestrated this whole thing, sorry. But he's like this cute dog and starts licking his face. It's really weird, very Japanese.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's such a strange for that to be one of the endings. Like if you didn't know that was gonna happen,
Yeah.
and you played this like horrifying game, and at the end that was the result. You're like, what in the world? This is the end of Silent Hill 2?
But I mean, I think what's great about the endings is like it gives you more time to replay.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you came upon that one at that ending organically, if you would be like,
Yeah.
what the weird? Like,
Oh, yeah.
Which one did you come across the first time?
I did come across the canon ending.
Okay.
And there's
Have you
certain.
played the game, Mucci?
yeah.
Which one did you?
I think the same one.
Yeah. So the
Is it easier
not
to
the
get to
dog
that
one.
one, maybe?
yeah. So like
Probably.
it's considered technically like the canon ending, and it's considered a bad ending, but.
So you need the dog one.
Yeah,
a good
well,
ending.
the reason why is like the actions that cause you to get the regular ending is like you have to take a certain number of damage in order to do that. Whereas like if you don't take any damage, that affects the outcome. And then there's
okay.
certain items that are in your inventory that at certain spots when you transfer over to a different part, you have to look at for a certain number of like seconds. It's really complicated. Nobody would have figured this out.
Right. This
Yeah.
sounds like PT.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
you beat PT by like speaking words into the microphone or something.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Physical
Yeah.
therapy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you beat
Mucci,
physical
tell me about some good storylines with your games.
Yeah, so I want to talk about like kind of more of the formal like storytelling aspects of it that I find really interesting. And number one is that in Resident Evil 2, You can play as two different characters. You can play as Leon Kennedy in his first
Okay, so we're
appearance.
doing the Battle of Twos here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in his first day at the job, he is the protagonist of 4 later. He's like, iconic character.
Who was the character for the first one? Because I think I know Leon.
So
And I think I played 4, so maybe that's where I know him from. But
probably, yeah. And the first one you can play as Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield.
I know him too.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So in the second game, though, the other character you can play is Claire Redfield, who is like looking for her brother at the police department, and then for Leon, it's his first day on the job at the police department. The day that everything goes to hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So in any event, you can choose to play as Leon or Claire, but whoever you choose to play as, once you beat the game, then you unlock scenario B for the other character. So if you beat it as Leon, then you unlock Claire's scenario B. And then you can then just jump to Claire's scenario B from your save file, keep playing it, and then you would get the true ending of the game by beating it with both Leon and Claire.
Okay.
And you could also play it Claire A, Leon B, and it's not the same story. Or it's slightly different. There's slight changes. Different characters are met at different times. Different things happen. So there's kind of dispute over which one's canon. Still to this day. I mean, some people will say definitively, I think it's Claire A, Leon B is supposed to be canon. But some people are like, well, there's still like inconsistencies in there. So, Capcom just we just care to make it kind of like a fun and interesting experience rather than like having to fit with all our, 50 other Resident Evil games. But I just think it's a cool kind of mechanic to the storytelling that you'll flip to this other perspective and you'll see that, how their scenario plays out, but their scenario would play out differently in A versus B.
So if you play one of them first and then you play the second person, is the person that you played first, are they doing the same stuff that you did? Or are they interacting differently?
It's not as much as there are some later Resident Evil games where I think if you play as one character and like pick up certain items, like it won't be there. Actually, I think that is true in 2 as well. If you pick up certain items, it won't be there for the other character you play as.
Yeah.
So sometimes you want to okay, I'm going to leave that med pack there in case later as Claire I want to get it.
Yeah.
Outside of that, it's not necessarily, but they'll interact in different cutscenes and stuff. They'll see each other. So it kind of makes some form of sense of these 2 things are happening at the same time.
Do the protagonists encounter different characters or?
Yes. So particularly Leon's going to encounter Ada Wong.
Okay.
Who is also comes back in 4 and is also a really iconic character. Gets more fleshed out in 4 as well, but that's her introduction. And then Claire encounters Shelly.
Okay.
Shelly Winters is her name.
Right.
This little girl that you saves from this orphanage.
Wait, I thought that was Sherry Brinken.
Oh, why did I say Shelly Winters? Sherry.
Shelly Winters on the brain.
Oh, I got you. No,
Was that in your game?
no,
I don't know.
not
what
my
the hell.
game.
Yeah,
He knows his game.
I know my game.
Shelby Winters.
So on Resident Evil 2, I guess what's the main storyline that keeps it interesting, apart from being able to play these people?
Well,
Because I don't remember the game at all. I mean,
Yeah,
they're in Raccoon City. There's some zombies or something.
yeah. I mean, 2, you're first you're in the police department. Going through it. Yeah, the creature. There's a creature being developed. So there's this bioweapon creature that was developed. William Birkin.
Yeah.
Right.
I like how you just looked at me for approval.
And so he's the main boss at the end, and the kind of concept of him lusting for sort of power or control or domination and stuff like that. A lot of the storylines are kind of very straightforward. So I wanted to focus on this how the story's told, which is interesting more than so
sidestepping the question.
well, I mean, the question initially was storytelling.
Yeah.
But I just want to draw attention also to similarly in the first game, you can play as Jill or Chris, and you would get different endings depending on what you did for by like saving the opposite character. So if you saved Chris as Jill, and if you also saved Barry, you might get a different result as well. But one thing I did want to point out in the storytelling, a story that was is really one of the scariest parts of I think any Resident Evil game is having to do with Lisa Trevor. So her story comes in the remake of the first game, the 2002 remake for the GameCube. And she was the daughter of the architect who designed the Spencer Mansion, where the game takes place. So the story goes that after he completed the mansion, the Spencers invited them to come over as guests. And the wife and daughter went because the main guy was unable to at the time. And we'll meet up later. But when they got there, they were immediately detained and taken underground and injected with this progenitor virus. So
gross.
the mom was they both started deteriorating mentally, and the mom made plans to escape, but she had a poor reaction to the virus, so the scientists decided to just kill her anyway and execute her. So Lisa, the character, reacted a little bit better to the progenitor strain, and she developed this kind of superhuman strength. But her mental states became worse and worse, and she longed for her mother, didn't know where she was. A Spencer employee came pretending to be her mother, but she believed that the woman had stolen her mother's face, and she then tried to cut the woman's face off to get her mother's face back. And so she kept attacking employees in this manner, so they decided to eventually get rid of her and kill her. But she has she's able to regenerate, she's able to come back, so she was still alive around the time you encounter her in the game. She's living in this cabin off of the premises. But eventually you find her in the game, and what you're doing throughout, though, what I really like about the way the story is told is that in a lot of Resident Evil games, you get these little bits of story from from files you might pick up in the world. Mm-hmm. So you're getting a lot of this information from her diary, Lisa Trevor's diary, different other sources, and you're kind of piecing it together because there's not this long cutscene that explains this whole thing. It's it's
one of
really
those
cool
kind of things that I always when I see that stuff, I just skip through it.
Yeah, but it adds a lot of atmosphere and mood to it. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Before we get to the second question, I just want to ask you guys to subscribe, follow us on social media, shoot us a comment on the comment section. We'd appreciate it. So thanks. So the second question. I kind of want to get into the controls, the game aspect of these franchises, because I know, because they're a franchise of spanning many years, there's different consoles. Mm-hmm. Tell me, give me some little things about your franchises and what you liked about kind of the gameplay.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be quick.
Sure.
Basically, there's kind of three different styles of Resident Evil game. There are the fixed camera angle ones, the initial ones. Then there is the over-the-shoulder kind of one developed from 4. And then there's the newer ones are first-person. So the original fixed camera angle ones seems kind of dated now. But it kind of keeps the scares coming from I hear something. I have no control over the camera to see what's ahead of me. And then you turn the corner and there's all these zombies or something. But Resident Evil 4, in terms of gameplay, I think is the most influential game in the series because it really popularized that fixed camera angle behind the right shoulder of the protagonist in any third-person game, and then shifting to a different view when he pulls out his gun. So
kind of like a Fortnite thing, right?
Yeah, I mean almost any third-person shooter or adventure game, action game that came out after that, you can tie to Resident Evil 4, whereas, the first one has influence throughout, survival horror and making a genre out of that. This one is, explosive throughout all of video games, really. Any video game that has, a third-person protagonist, you see influence from it, I think, nowadays.
Okay, well, my argument to that, first of all, is let's talk about how Silent Hill walked so Resident Evil could run to Resident Evil 4, okay? So let's talk about those.
Isn't running better than walking?
Yeah. until you die of a heart attack. Mucci,
Running versus walking in OTR debate.
would you rather run or would you rather walk?
Let's walk to this next question.
All right. So, what my argument to this in terms of why Silent Hill is, I would say, gameplay design was ahead of its time was one, Konami, yes, while inspired by the Resident Evil series, in terms of like trying to get into the horror market. The problem with the Resident Evil series is, again, those fixed camera angles. So yeah, it did develop tension, but then there were moments where you were playing against a boss and you didn't have full control, so you were stuck into a corner, or you were kind of like in the middle of a pillar trying to get around the pillar because it's just in the background. Whereas like Silent Hill actually developed a full 3D environment. And sure, they didn't really know at first how to develop it, because at the time the technology for the PlayStation was still relatively new, but one of the developers had managed to create a system and had suggested, hey, like, you know, create the 3D environment. Some backgrounds can be remaining hidden because that can add to the tension. And then on top of that, throw on some fog and you won't know where the enemies are coming from. That allowed the characters that you were playing as a lot more freedom to explore the world without the frustration of the fixed camera angle. It was kind of like you were able to sort of like move in third person and freely like explore the world without like running into a pillar because you don't know like how to like turn left or how to turn right, just by like how confusing the controls are. So that's what I would say. It makes it very interesting and unique.
Okay. So, like what I'm hearing, but for closing arguments, Andy's kind of already touching on it. Trash the other side. Just very briefly, Mucci, tell us what you don't like about the Silent Hill franchise.
Well, you know, Silent Hill certainly is spooky because it is a dead franchise that they're finally trying to bring back from the dead. There has been
Hitting hard right at the back.
Well, Konami is definitely responsible, and I actually think Andy would agree with me here that they kind of killed their own franchise when they basically said, "Fuck you to Hideo Kojima.
Yeah.
We don't want to make your game," and that was like over 10 years ago now. Now they're finally bringing it back, and you know it's barely. I mean, I hear the remake is really good, but it's great. It's a remake of an old game. I don't know where the series goes from here. Whereas Resident Evil has been continuing to not only make remakes of its old games and doing them really well, and a way I think that is very influential on the remake of Silent Hill 2, but also continuing its mainline games and all these other spin-off games. Maybe too many of them. I get it. There's a lot. But the mainline games are all still really good, really innovative, and really interesting.
Yeah. So look, Resident Evil has its time and place for sure. And yes, Konami, being the greedy corporation that they are, killing their own franchise, and now all of a sudden trying to resurface and get some kind of money. I will say the thing that is I find really trite about the Resident Evil series is, okay, so cool, you had 4. Absolute masterpiece, you know, with the over the shoulder, great. But then after 5, I'm sorry, but like everything was so action based that they didn't even really focus on the characters. A lot of the characters felt very bland to me, whereas like in Silent Hill, there's a lot more opportunities to explore the characters, and there are even characters that you don't necessarily like or agree with, but at some point in time you represent them because you have made similar choices that they have made, and you understand why they made those choices. The fear and the horror that comes from this game ultimately is not because you're shooting some zombie that's trying to eat your face off. The horror is the isolation that you feel in this game, and the guilt that you have felt for anything that you've done in the past, and that you have to deal with it sort of alone. And the fact that like the creatures in the town itself turns on you for all the shit that you have done. And I don't think there's anything scarier than a stupid man that punches a boulder in the 5th game. Take that.
Okay. What are you trying to say? There's no rebuttal. I have pretty much reached my decision, and I'll give you the verdict. But I have one last tiny question, and I just want to. It goes to Andy. It's a question, and you know, I don't want an explanation or anything. But Andy, remember when you brought a VR headset to play during one of our recording sessions?
Yeah.
What game did we play? Do you remember?
It was The Walking Dead, which is not a Resident Evil game.
I think it was a Resident Evil game.
Oh, was it Resident Evil 4? Yeah, I guess it was.
Despite all of that, I'm still going to give it to Andy.
Hey.
Yeah, so, I mean, sorry, Mucci, I just wanted to give him shit for that.
That's fair.
It was definitely a Resident Evil game.
Deserved.
And we were playing it, and the zombies were coming at us, and we were like, oh, shit.
He did say even in his closing that Resident Evil 4 is a masterpiece, so it's hard to dispute that.
Yeah, that's a good game. I've played that game. I've played probably the second one, I think. They're interesting, and I played some of them on the Wii too, so like you're shooting kind of differently with a different controller. Silent Hill, haven't played any of them, but it sounds like, especially for this episode, you know, we're in the spooky season, spookiest of days. And I think Silent Hill fits the, you know, theme, the vibe, everything better. So, win goes to Andy. If you want to face off against Mucci in a pro se litigant section, you might not be as lucky. Just letting you know, he's pretty good.
He is.
But this has been OTR Debate. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.